Well, I'm Kim Fisher. I work together with Justin and the team at the Innovation Institute for Food and Health, the people who brought you the show this week. And I am going to talk a little bit, just for 10 minutes before our next panel, a little bit from the pharmaceutical industry perspective, but about sort of what's coming down the pipeline. We know that what's happening is really big, and I'm here to say it's going to get even bigger. So I'll share some data and some information about that. Just to add, I have another role as well. I'm the chair of research for Breakthrough T1D, which is formerly the Juvenile Diabetes Research Foundation, which is where I interface a little more with some of these pharmaceutical companies, as well as my main job here at UC Davis. So Justin shared those really sort of stunning obesity maps this morning. And this is just kind of adding data to that, which is that nearly 3/4 of Americans are overweight or obese. And we talked a little bit in the last session about sort of being, skinny and having an unhealthy heart, or being overweight and being healthy. But the other piece of data that I don't have up here from a UNC study, University of North Carolina study, is that 88% of Americans are metabolically unhealthy. 88%. I mean, that's pretty much everybody is metabolically unhealthy. So we have an enormous problem, and something needs to be done to fix it. And I will talk internationally as well. I'm focused a lot on the US for my first few slides because that's where some of the biggest issues are. I know there was a gentleman who talked about, countries. There are countries that have 70% obesity too. So we're not the top, but we're the biggest. This is the current use of, as Justin said, we can use Ozempic generically, but generally right now they're either GLP or GLP, GIP drugs, medications. 12% of Americans have used these, 12%. So that's a lot. It's 41 million Americans have used these medications. And yes, they have side effects. Sometimes people lose insurance coverage. Sometimes they, have lifestyle interventions together with them and are able to go off of them. So right now, 6% of people are currently using these drugs. That's 20 million people. And I would guess that this is actually an underrepresentation. I know a lot of people personally who take these drugs who don't have great insurance coverage, and so they get them from a compounding pharmacy in Canada. And that probably isn't in these statistics here. We talked a little bit this morning also about how these drugs started, and there are some earlier generations of these drugs, but these are kind of the current ones that are on the market right now. We have two pens that are GLP-1s, semaglutide, the Ozempic and the Wegovy. Ozempic for type 2 diabetes and Wegovy for weight loss, which is the same drug at a higher dose. Same with Zepbound and Mounjaro, one for type 2 diabetes, one for weight loss. These are the GLP-1 GIP drugs, one at a higher dose for weight loss, but same drug. And then finally, we have Rybelsus, which is the oral medication taken daily of a GLP-1, which you would think would have better uptake, and it's not that popular yet, partly because when you take Rybelsus, you have to drink a lot of water, you can't eat for an hour, and so people are finding that just a little hard to manage to make it work effectively, so it's not as popular as future generations of oral medications might be. But just wanted to sort of say these are the main therapies on the market right now. And I think someone else also mentioned how many clinical studies are happening with medications in the pipeline. There are over 100 clinical studies in the pipeline right now. I think about over 40 of them are in phase 3, meaning we'll see new things on the market in the next year or two. One, and Bethany, Dr. Cummings talked about this quite a bit, combination therapies. One of the benefits of combination therapies is you can have fewer side effects because you're getting less of each medication when you're taking these. So they're more effective because they're combination medications, but you can also mitigate side effects because they're combination medications. So I think once these different combination therapies get on the market, I think we're going to see an increase in people staying on these medications and getting on these medications because the side effects will be lesser. Simpler routines. I talked about the Rybelsus pill and how people are not taking the pill because you have to drink water and wait to eat. Well, there are pills coming on the market in phase 3 clinical studies right now with Eli Lilly where you won't have to have those kinds of restrictions around taking the pill. Earlier in clinical studies, so not about to come to market, are weekly pills, which I think is going to really increase the amount of people who are taking these medications for all kinds of reasons. And then finally, monthly injections. So injections are never fun. So if we can do them less frequently, I think people will avail themselves of these medications even more. And then finally, as the last panel talked about, all of the new indications, all of the other ways that these medications affect body systems, within the last year, these drugs have been approved for kidney disease, heart disease, cardiovascular disease. We didn't even talk about sleep apnea. And then there are trials going on now for many other things than what I have even listed here, but alcoholism and other addiction disorders, type 1 diabetes, Alzheimer's. I was surprised about knee osteoarthritis pain. Not sure I get that one yet, but maybe it's inflammation related. But there are so many ways that GLP-1s impact our body systems, as that last panel highlighted in more depth than I'll ever be able to. And so all these new indications are coming, which means that even more people are going to be taking these medications. This is kind of the total available market for all of these indications. So the dark blue bar is all of the people who could be taking these medications. I think, Justin, you had a similar slide. And the light blue is the number of people who already are. So 19 million people are taking these drugs in the US only for obesity, and 140 million people are sort of the total available market. But then you look at all of these other things, cardiovascular disease, diabetes is really the only place where, about 42% of people who have type 2 diabetes are taking these medications because it's proven to be so life-changing and so effective. And the other thing that was briefly mentioned is money. Ozempic is going off patent. I mentioned that I know so many people buying these drugs from Canada. Well, Ozempic is going off patent in Canada next year. I think this is going to have a huge impact on the number of people who are taking these medications going off patent in the United States in 2032. And again, we don't really know what will happen because as these combination therapies and other therapies come on the market that might have fewer side effects, it could be that people don't want Ozempic anymore, which is just a straight GLP-1. But if you can buy it at a price that is much more affordable, that would be great. I mean, right now I spend $900 on an Ozempic pen for my daughter who has type 1 diabetes because it gives her really incredible glucose control overnight. And I hope that this gets approved for type 1 diabetes because it's so effective for her. But in the meantime, I'll spend what I can, but I am trying to buy a bigger Ozempic pen and have it last many months and just trying to figure out how to do this. So when Ozempic goes, off patent in Canada, that's where I'll be shopping. And I said I'd come back around to international growth. So this is the worldwide obesity map. Justin shared the U.S. obesity maps, but you can see where we've been exporting this good. Well, there aren't that many companies in that dark blue, more than 30% that the United States is in. And I will add, there are countries where obesity is, 70%. So and the US, it's 42%. So these numbers don't even get at the magnitude of the problem right now. But I'd say anything that's light blue or dark blue, these are markets where these medications their use of them is going to grow. Right now, the international market for GLP-1 and GLP-1 GIP medications is less than 1%. So in the US, somewhere between 6 and 12% if you want to talk about current users or people who have ever used them, but it's less than 1% in the rest of the world. So I expect we're going to see more and more use internationally as well. And my point in sharing all these slides is really, I talk to people who say, oh, there are side effects. It's just a fad. People aren't going to keep taking these medications. And for better or worse, I mean, really mostly I think for better, these medications are going to have a huge impact, and they already do, and it's going to grow. And then this is the slide that really blew my mind. And you can find a lot of similar studies on the internet now. And I think this is evolving too, as we, have people like Dr. Ali telling his patients protein, protein, protein. But what you see here in the dark blue is less consumption. This is people who are taking a GLP-1 medication. Are they eating more or less of a certain food? And so you can see people are eating like 70 to 80% less of pasta, alcohol, pizza, burgers, desserts, and they're eating 60 to 70% more of salads, bowls. I wasn't sure what bowls were, so I added that picture. I think that kind of exemplifies a bowl. Salads, bowls, fruits, vegetables. This shows chicken consumption equal. I think chicken consumption is probably growing. But what people are eating when they are taking these medications is very different than what they were eating. And I think this is a real pivotal moment and an opportunity for those of us who work in the food industry. This is like a time where financial incentives are really aligned with what we all want, which is for humans to be healthier. And so I think there's a ton of opportunity to think about, well, how are we going to give this new customer the foods that they want and the foods that will keep them healthy? And I think I think it's a beautiful thing that our financial incentives are now aligned with, I think, that desire that we all have. We're all here in this room, so we know it's important to create a healthier food system. Oh, and I did like a little math problem because I thought this would be fun to see, like, what does this mean in dollars? And you could look at, basically like we're going to need more fruits and vegetables and salads and bowls and chicken and, other things. Now the people are eating less sweet, salty, greasy food and addictive food like alcohol or drinks. So I did a little math problem, and I won't step through it. But the result is, based on that data of people who are taking these medications, eating 84% less dessert, and using even the conservative estimate of 6% of people in the US taking these medications, if they're eating 84% less desserts and there's 20 million people taking these medications, that's a nearly $3 billion reduction in dessert consumption, which is enormous. And on the flip side, there's an increase in consumption of other things. So it's a big change. And we're going to talk a lot about that. I'm going to invite up now our panel, which is people from the food industry, to talk about reshaping nutrition for the GLP-1 consumer. I also want to just note that our final session, because it came up a lot this morning, is going to be on the brain, nutrition, and metabolic hormones, which touches on what I'm talking about too in terms of addictive behaviors in food. So what I talked about here is going to be covered in more depth by our next panel. And so I'd like to invite Irina Adler up. Irina, to lead our next session on reshaping nutrition for the GLP-1 consumer. Thank you.